I am also a survivor of sexual abuse, and I believe without a doubt that the circumstances that led to my abuse and allowed it to continue are directly the result of the fact that the organizations created by Congress to oversee and protect me as an athlete, USA Gymnastics and the United States Olympic and Paralympic Committee failed to do their jobs. Nelson Mandela once said, there can be no keener revelation of a society's soul than the way in which it treats its children. It is the power of that statement that compels and empowers me to be here in front of you today. I don't want another young gymnast, Olympic athlete, or any individual to experience the horror that I and hundreds of others have endured before, during, and continuing to this day in the wake of the Larry Nassar abuse. To be clear, sorry.
Take your time.
To be clear, I blame Larry Nassar, and I also blame an entire system that enabled and perpetrated his abuse. USA Gymnastics and the United States Olympic and Paralympic Committee knew that I was abused by their official team doctor long before I was ever made aware of their knowledge.
So that is Olympic gold medalist, gymnast Simone Biles, the GOAT, of course, testifying before Congress, a Senate Judiciary Committee, along with fellow gymnasts about the FBI's inaction after being told of the many abuses by their physician, Larry Nassar. They have testified before, they have told this story before. That was to a judge. Larry Nassar has been sentenced to something like 265 years to life in prison, whichever comes first. That's a lot of years. But there she is. This is not about Larry Nassar. This is about the inaction of the FBI and of the Olympic Committee and of USA Gymnastics. So Simone Biles says that the United States Olympic and Paralympic Committee, quote, failed to do their jobs. And that is because a report found that even though gymnasts first reported the sexual assault allegations to the FBI in 2015, Larry Nassar continued to treat gymnasts at the Michigan State University, a high school and gymnastics club, until September 2016. The hearing Wednesday also included testimony from decorated gymnasts Michaela Moore, Aly Raisman, Maggie Nichols, who described their abuse in graphic detail and called for the institutions and people who should have protected them to be held accountable. I just want to play one more clip. This is from Michaela Moore.
Chose to lie about what I said and protect a serial child molester rather than protect not only me, but countless others. I was naked, completely alone, with him on top of me, molesting me for hours. I told them I thought I was going to die that night. I began crying at the memory over the phone, and there was just dead silence. After that minute of silence, he asked, "Is that all?" The truth is, my abuse was enough, and they wanted to cover it up. They chose to falsify my report and to not only minimize my abuse, but silence me yet again. They allowed a child molester to go free for more than a year. What is the point of reporting abuse if our own FBI agents are going to take it upon themselves to bury that report in a drawer?
So there you have it. That is Michaela Moore testifying that when she went to the FBI, that they not only treated her callously, but also sat on that report for many years. I want to turn over to David Shuster. Just thoughts and reactions to this.
Well, look, it was heart-wrenching to see any of this testimony yesterday. And I think it was very important for everybody to see, because there is a culture at the FBI, at least there has been a culture at the FBI that tends to be, very sort of macho culture that is perhaps dismissive of female athletes, particularly female children. And while Christopher Wray, who's the FBI director, was not in charge of the FBI back in 2015 or 2016, it wasn't that long ago that this was going on. The other thing that just is so striking about it, in addition to, I think, the need to change the culture of the FBI, which I think Christopher Wray is starting to do, do, and the FBI agent was fired who was involved in sort of taking these reports. But it is so inspiring. It is so courageous for these women, not only to sort of make the initial report 5 or 6 years ago, but also to have the courage to go in front of Congress, where senators are not usually the most sort of sensitive or maybe plugged into gymnastics that you would imagine, or to athletes. For them to be able to go and take that sort of public stand and say, this matters, and I was hurt by this. I mean, I just think that shows an even greater strength than any of their physical feats that they're able to do in their somersaults or anything else in their routines. I mean, the strength it takes to be able to do this is really inspiring and underscores why these are such amazing role models for all of our children and daughters and sons and everybody else.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I can't help but think about the recent Olympics, right? And what happened when Simone Biles was last in the news, which was her decision to not compete, feeling like she was not in the mental state to compete, feeling like she might injure herself gravely if she did compete. And she got, thrown through the ringer by the media, by a lot of right wingers, of course, who, of course, it should not be lost on anyone that they went after her specifically because she is a woman, because she is a Black woman, she's a female athlete, and then you see the kinds of things that have been going on behind the scenes. So look, it's one thing to not stand up for your players or to feel like they're hung out to dry in front of the media, right? In front of the sort of seething, teeming media, always trying to get a bite of these athletes. And then it's another to see actually behind the scenes that for years, it's not just the FBI, but it is also USA Gymnastics. It is also the Olympic Committee, that there were rumors, there were reports. We're talking about, I misspoke. It was 265 women and girls that Larry Nassar abused, right? 175 years in prison. So, I mean, it is very understandable that at this point, these incredible gymnasts should feel completely mistrustful of any of the institutions that they work for, that they're making money for, right? That all the advertisements that they are propping up, and yet when it comes to them having their backs, they haven't.
Yeah, and you mentioned institutions. I mean, the other thing that just still strikes me, and full clarification. I mean, I went to the University of Michigan, which is only about 70 miles away from East Lansing, or Michigan State University. The Big Ten schools, all of them, you're talking about the premier athletic departments, the premier institutions of higher learning. So for this to slip under the radar or to be ignored at Michigan State University, a Big Ten member university, is unfathomable. And so clearly, I mean, Michigan State has been trying to sort of change their culture and figure out what went wrong, and there've been huge payouts. But again, not that long ago at some of the most respected institutions in our country, and for athletes just 5 or 6 years ago, to not be able to trust in some of the premier institutions of higher education, some of the premier institutions in terms of amateur athletics, again, says so much about where we are as a society and how much more work we still have to do, particularly when it comes to women in athletics.
Yes. Oh yeah, and also not to mention the bad faith discussions around preventing trans people from, playing on the teams that they want to, and oh, we gotta protect women and girls sports. We gotta protect, excuse me. You sat on this report for months. I want to go to a quote, Aly Raisman, who also an Olympic medalist, also part of the USA Gymnastics team, or former. Aly Raisman, who is a retired from gymnastics and competed with Maroney at the 2012 Olympics in London, said it took the FBI 14 months to interview her about the allegations against Nassar. Raisman said that the FBI, USAG, and USOPC quietly allowed Nassar to slip out the side door and continue his work, finding more than 100 new victims to molest. I mean, that's chilling, right? To know that as a survivor, as someone who's been victimized, that you could have, these women wanted to prevent there to be future victims, right? And that is, that's the other thing that happens when women speak out, right? What's in it for them is the discussion. What are they angling for? What do they want? Oh, they just want headlines, et cetera. And look, I understand this is an extreme case of abuse, but we know that the victims often get re-victimized by the narratives and the lies told about them and about their so-called claim, searching for fame. Well, what they're searching for is to prevent this from happening. What they're searching for is justice, but really more than justice, it's to put these people out of harm's way or out of the way of other young girls and women who could potentially be victimized.
And it hits home personally to me, Francesca, because I have an 8-year-old daughter who loves gymnastics. And because of all this stuff, I mean, my wife and I now, we're sort of on guard when our daughter goes to her gymnastics club, because if it can happen at a Michigan State University at the highest levels of gymnastics, surely it can happen at other places as well. And to have that conversation with your 8-year-old daughter who loves gymnastics about, okay, here's some things that you need to be on guard for, because this is part of our society. It is heart-wrenching, it is disturbing. These are our children. And anybody says, oh no, we're talking about 14 and 15-year-olds. No, you're talking about kids who are as young as 11, 12 years old, who are sort of at the peak of their gymnastics career, the formative years. And to think that they're not safe when they're doing their gymnastics, something that they love, and that they have to be on guard against predators. I mean, it's just sickening.
Yes, yeah. And I mean, the last thing I'll say on this is that, I think that sometimes the silence, especially in these industries that are supposedly elite, like you're saying, like Michigan State University and, Olympic committees, right? Like a lot of that silence comes because you put too much trust in these institutions that supposedly are supposed to support the athletes. And you're like, well, how could this be abuse if this is a physician that has been contracted and hired by USA Gymnastics, who's been working for them for decades, right? And there have been accomplices. Look, once again, nobody does this stuff alone, all right? And there were accomplices in this case. One man who actually took his own life instead of face justice on this. But I think that's often what prevents survivors from speaking out. Simone Biles, she's an Olympic gold medalist. You know what it is to come forward to the world and say, I am pretty much the best in the game, right? And yes, I too was victimized, because it's half of it you don't believe that your institution would hang you out to dry, and half of it is an exercise in humility and an exercise in bravery for saying, yeah, no, I too can actually be victimized. I too can be like, I don't know. I would say like duped in this case, right? And told and fed lies about this person.
And it's almost, Francesca, it's almost like duped because there's an incentive that still exists to produce wins, to produce gold medals. And one of the best coaches that I've ever known said, look, I say, what kind of team are we gonna have? And he says, you ask me in 20 years from now, when your teammates, in terms of what kind of husbands and fathers and human beings they are, and then I'll be able to tell you what kind of team you had. That's how it should be throughout amateur athletics. It's not about churning out gold medals and churning out wins. It's about developing everybody's character. That has to matter.
Yeah. And like David said, the FBI agent who did handle this case was fired. But I think you could argue that is such a big case that it really, how could it have been just one person? So it's that culture of the FBI that I think a lot of us fundamentally disagree with. But there can be reforms even within such a apparently broken institution.
For more political news breakdowns, interviews, stories of activism, and me trying my hardest to care about the occasional big celebrity news story, subscribe to our YouTube channel at youtube.com/thedamagereport. And you can ring the bell wherever it is so you don't miss anything.